Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Flashback to the Track. I am Mark, and in today's episode, I'm alone. James is not here, but it's a kind of a special episode because we're starting off a series of interviews with different racing drivers and people in the racing industry. I had a chance to talk via Skype with a friend of mine, Mark Wilkins. Mark is a current Hyundai factory driver. He drives for Bryan Herta Autosport in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge Series, and they actually just won the championship last year in their first season competing. The two-team cars finished 1 and 2, so they're looking to have a big season again in 2020, and they'll be headed off to the Roar before the 24 actually this weekend. I'll be there as well. I jet off tomorrow morning, so I'm looking forward to getting back to a racetrack, and it's been a while. It's been about 6 weeks since I've been to a track, so looking forward to it. But Mark and I sat down to talk about his time in the GrandAm Rolex Sports Car Series. If you remember GrandAm, it was a sports car series owned by NASCAR. It featured the Daytona prototype, which was kind of an interesting prototype car. It didn't really look like anything else, and it's kind of known for being like one of the ugliest sports cars ever. I always found them kind of endearing. It was really cool. GrandAm had a lot of NASCAR interests, so there was all kinds of NASCAR drivers at GrandAm races and running in the Rolex 24. We had huge fields of cars, 60, 70 cars for the Rolex 24 at Daytona. So I always loved GrandAm. I love watching it, and we're going to go back and talk to Mark about his time in GrandAm when he used to drive for IMSA Autosport and also some of the other racing that he was doing at the time, and just sort of get his insight on the GrandAm series. We're going to kind of join right in the middle of Mark sort of giving us his intro into GrandAm. You're supposed to, when you record an interview, do one of those hokey, like, first you answer the phone and you greet each other and you're like, hey, how's it going? All right, we're going to record this thing, and you're supposed to do like oh, hey, Mark, how's it going? But I totally forgot to do that. So we're just going to join him kind of mid-sentence and just hear, what's going on. And he'll talk about his time at GrandAm. We'll have a great discussion, and I'm really hoping we can do more of these interviews. And then goes for about 25 minutes, and then when you hear the music at the end, you'll be looking forward to the next episode. So I hope everybody had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to everyone. It's 2020, so please enjoy this interview with Mark Wilkins, and hopefully we'll bring you more in the future.
So the series seemed super cool, and it was a place that my dad had been racing and really enjoyed the racing, and it was kind of like a window into sports car racing for me, because I had been at the same time doing all open wheel in Canada, first in 1600 and then 2-liter in the States. And I think at the time that we ran at Daytona, I would have been running Formula Renault or up to sort of Star Mazda. And so I was kind of dabbling in GrandAm, and I just liked it. It was just fun racing, great competitive racing, in street cars. I think at the time I thought, well, open wheel's way cooler, but that's just an age thing. And then, it kind of evolved to, where do you go from, from open wheel? And at the time, it was kind of like, well, GrandAm's really growing, in this new Daytona prototype class is really, the cars are kind of funky looking, but they were, at the time, they still seemed expensive. But compared to today, it's insane. How much less costly they were to run. But it was kind of like, do you go to open wheel route and take the risk, when IndyCar and Champ Car were kind of in their struggles, and it just looked really uncertain there as far as trying to make a career. And so having done some GrandAm races and having had a bit of success, early on, I thought, well, what, Daytona prototype, would be an awesome place to go. And they had 20 plus car fields, and the growth looked really strong. And then GrandAm was, going to, get the NASCAR influence. So NASCAR was going to buy them, and all of this sort of in the mid 2000s just looked incredibly exciting. It was like, man, NASCAR is going to own sports car racing, and NASCAR is the biggest thing. And so they're going to bleed a bunch of money into GrandAm, and it's going to grow into this massive thing. And so it just seemed like the cool up and coming place to be, and the racing was cool, and the cars were fun to drive and really raw. And then, of course, the stock market crashed in '08, and everything that NASCAR kind of was going to do to GrandAm, they kind of put on the back burner, because of obviously because of that impact and how that affected NASCAR and all of the uncertainty in the global markets. So it was kind of crazy because we dove in '06 and ran strong in '07. And then, we always kind of had committed to a strong 3-year effort to try to build my career and just try to see where GrandAm would go. And '08, being the financial, the tricky financial year, was also happened to be a fantastic year for us. And still extremely strong. I mean, just great racing and, 20 plus cars, and then perhaps just a little bit less of the stuff that they were hoping to bring over to GrandAm to really grow it as a result of that, the changes on the financial side. So, yeah, I don't know if how much of that question that answers for you.
Yeah. No problem. That's great. Yeah. Like, just basically what I wanted to ask you about was, to start with, is, so the first time you drove Daytona prototype, I've had a lot of people ask, like, they want to know basically that car, how it compares to, like, other cars at the time, like sort of your ALMS, LMP1, LMP2 cars or LMPC cars, how it sort of, because a lot of guys drove both series. I know guys like Andy Wallace, Butch Leitzinger, they go back and forth. So how, like, I'm not sure, did you ever, I know you drove an LMPC car
I did.
for a time with level 5, but how did that car sort of compare to the other stuff that you drove at the time?
I guess comparing to the LMPC car would be the closest thing for me. And it seemed like the GrandAm series was just a bit more raw. It was had a little more that NASCAR influence, and so it was kind of like, your 5-liter V8. Cars didn't have all the nannies and all the things that would make the car easier to drive. I mean, they were kind of 500-ish horsepower, just super raw tube frame chassis cars, and I think that's what kept the costs down. It didn't do anything to the race, and the racing was all fantastic. But compared to like an LMPC, it was maybe a little less refined, just more raw would be the big thing. The LMPC car, was a bit more finesse and, carbon tub and, that paddle shift gearbox versus the, the sequential in the DP where you'd be banging through the gearbox, with your right hand. It was, but the predating all the paddle shift stuff. So I guess ALMS seemed to be, a little bit, maybe a bit more ahead of the time and a little bit more about technology and the latest and greatest and more aerodynamics. And so the drive and the feel of the car, was a little bit different, a little bit, maybe just a little bit higher technology, I suppose, just a little different spec. But I thought the DP cars, just the level of rawness and especially in this day and age where everything is just about technology. I think it was so cool and so much fun to drive those cars where you just had to get in and wheel them. I mean, you just had to drive them, and they weren't the easiest car to drive. They weren't the hardest car to drive. They were just, you had to work, and they were hot. And, you have some races where you didn't feel great when you got out because they were stinking hot. And they made you work. So it was just a ton of fun, really, overall. And I know people harped on the, how the look and the feel of the car kind of was like raw. And I think what was cool about that is that the outside appearance almost reflected the driving experience, I suppose. They were kind of one in one or hand in hand. And that was really neat. So yeah, I mean, that's the biggest thing I would say is just that GrandAm was just raw and that's what made it really unique.
I think the term I would use is like, it's very grassroots compared to maybe ALMS, where you got factories, right? There wasn't really a lot of factories in GrandAm. You could just, build a car with your buddies and go racing, kind of like old NASCAR.
Yeah, and when we took on that project, of course, it was with AIM Autosport, and I'd raced with AIM Autosport, I guess in total for about 10 years, and they really really kind of set my career off, and thanks to Ian Keith and of course Andrew Bourdin, it was just we kind of were a team that ran open wheel and were relatively kind of grassroots, but a team that had been so successful in open wheel, and we kind of, when we talked to Ian and said, hey, what about this GrandAm thing? What about Daytona prototype? Why don't we just take the team and let's grow it. Let's make this really big. And Ian and Andrew, they said, heck yeah, let's do it. It's we can compete. And like you're saying, I think that was cool about GrandAm is that, a little privateer effort could show up and race and win races. And, it didn't have the big factory. I mean, we dealt with Roush and with the motors and BMW and Dynan. And of course, Lexus is where we started, and TRD. So, it kind of had a bit of influence, but we could still go out there and race for wins. And I'm not sure you could say the same these days. I think it would be, it would be tricky. It would be tough. It would certainly be a lot more expensive too.
Yeah, and so in 2006, you guys enter your first prototype race, which is that weird summer sprint race they used to do, the Brumos Porsche 250 at Daytona. And James Hinchcliffe was your teammate, and that was probably before anyone knew who James Hinchcliffe was. I think he was like 19 at the time.
Yes. So James and I were teammates at AIM in the Star Mazdas, and so James and I know each other quite well. And when it came down to this new direction for AIM to kind of complement their open wheel programs, James was the natural fit. I mean, he's such a great talent, great driver, and we said, why don't we do this one together? It would be fun, and it was a one-off. We had just received the car. The team would have just received all the equipment to do pit stops and driver change, and all of the whole endurance format stuff was new. And so we had zero expectations in that race. It was just bring the car out, try to finish, and maybe we'll get a half decent result, but it had nothing to do with the result. It was just about the process. And James was the perfect fit to do that, since we were working together on the open wheel side.
And then in 2007, you go full time, and you kind of had some different co-drivers, obviously, for the longer races. But you seem to have the team had a very good relationship with the Frizzell family, because you had Bert or Bryan Frizzell in the car pretty much every race. And I think eventually it was mostly your teammate was Bert in the later years, right?
Yeah, that's right. So exactly. So Bert and Bryan were fantastic drivers and teammates. They were great guys, and we became quite good friends amidst the whole race program. And I ran, definitely with some mixed driver pairings, especially in the long races. But ultimately, I think the year that was the highlight was 2008. And I spent that year with Bryan. And then, in 2009 and 2010, we still had some great successes, Bert and I. And I think that we all had such a good working relationship that it was just an easy sort of seamless fit. And they were great. I mean, they were able to get the job done in the car, which obviously helped with the later years and carrying the motorsport career further down the road.
Yeah, 2008, you were talking about, it's kind of your big year. We started talking about the intro. So yeah, in 2007, you guys weren't on the podium. You had a couple top fives, but in 2008, you win that race in Montreal, which is, on Canadian soil, which is really cool for a Canadian team. And everyone's like, wow, that's pretty crazy. But then you win again the next week at Watkins Glen as well.
Yeah, that year was a crazy good year overall. I mean, we started at Daytona. We had a really stout driver lineup, and we were leading. And we had some issues that obviously took us out of the race. But we knocked on the door for the wins that entire season. And Montreal was one we totally didn't expect to win. That looked like we were going to finish third or fourth. which would have been a great result for us. And then, but fuel strategy played in, and Ian called a great strategy, which gave us a position to know that we were fine on fuel and push really hard at the end of that race. And our competitors were a bit short, and so it was kind of a surreal one. It was, I think it's still in the books as the closest finished in GrandAm series history. Which was really neat, and we left there with a lot of confidence because we had knocked on the door. I think even at Barber, Bryan was leading, and then we had an issue with the car, and so we had a few highs that turned into big lows, and so Montreal kind of turned it around for us, and when we went to the Glen, that short course at the Glen is just a fast, cool, wicked racetrack, and we just had a great amount of momentum and confidence going into that race, and we were just strong. It just everything clicked. We did everything right. It was like a textbook weekend, and and we tried to and kind of continue that to the end of the year. But those were definitely the two highlights, and I remember lots of celebrations around those, especially for, the team, and, it was always, the little team that could, with AIM, how could we have accomplished that goal? And, it just was testament to, just how great the team is, the personnel, and just the synergy that we all had. That season was just really, really great.
And I'll kind of ask, so, with all the, relationship with NASCAR that GrandAm had, and having races, on NASCAR weekends and stuff, did you ever get an opportunity to drive like a Busch car or an Xfinity car at any time? Like, anyone ever approach you about that? I know Michael Valiante drove one at Montreal, and a lot of other Canadian drivers. Did you ever get asked about that?
No, I never did, and I know a lot of drivers were asked, especially about the road courses. And it's probably in hindsight something that I should have explored more. I think I was just so focused on the Daytona prototype GrandAm program. I've always been one of those drivers that's like to really give 110% in the program that I'm in. And I always felt that trying to take on additional or different types of driving that, could, or could be dramatically or at least somewhat different from what I'm doing, could kind of detract from the main program. And so I think at the time, I just really wanted to focus on the Daytona prototype side and try to build my career in sports cars. And I never really got approached, and I guess I never really pushed it to try to do like a Busch race or truck or anything. And in hindsight, that probably would have been something that would have been super cool and really neat to have tried.
And so going on through your career, I know 2009, 2010, AIM's doing its thing. You don't win any more races, but there's a couple podiums in there and some highlights. And then in 2011, you go part-time with the team, but you actually got to drive with Scott Tucker's team, Level 5, at Daytona that year.
Yeah. So I had been running with Level 5 in ALMS and in the LMPC car with quite a bit of success. We won quite a few of the long endurance races in 2010. And so, one of the things that, I'd asked the team was, hey, is there an opportunity to be one of the drivers in your effort at Daytona for the 24? And, everything had gone so well with them on the LMS side that they naturally thought that was a good idea. And so I became a part of that effort for that race, and got to drive with some pretty stout teammates. It was kind of a surreal experience for me, for sure. And I don't think the results at the end of the day weren't spectacular or for that race, but that race is so tricky. You just never know kind of what you're going to get. But certainly, a great overall experience and sort of career building sort of side of things on the LMS side. And then to be able to bring it back to Daytona for the 24 with them was a really cool experience.
Because if I'm not mistaken, at this time, GrandAm had no driver rankings, right? You could just stack cars with as many pros as you wanted, right?
I believe so at the time. If I'm not mistaken, that's right. You could just stack the deck. And so I guess it was pretty cool to, for at least on the Level 5 side where they tended to stack the deck a lot. on both in both ALMS and in GrandAm. It was cool to have the opportunity to be in that lineup at Daytona. And of course, in ALMS, there was driver ratings. So that did factor into my sort of initial involvement with the team, slotting in, I think, in that silver driver role. But certainly for Daytona, no, it was open game for them, and it was cool to get that opportunity.
And the other thing I really wanted to ask about was just some of the weird racetracks that GrandAm went to. Like I found GrandAm really endearing because they went to the Phoenix Road Course and the Iowa Road Course and the Homestead Road Course and just weird roval tracks. And what's it like wheeling a GrandAm Daytona prototype around the Iowa Road Course, which I think was like 1.3 miles or something like that?
Yeah, I guess the one that catches my, that really comes to memory the best actually is Homestead. And I think because it was the power steering motors in those DP cars would always kind of lock up at a certain load. They'd just max out, and then you would lose the power steering. And at Homestead, it was always in the middle of the banking in 6th gear, flat out, as fast as you could go, right in the middle of the banking. The steering would just lock, and if you were on the wrong trajectory, you were not going to be able to do anything about it. And so it was such a weird, disconcerting feeling, when you'd go in on entry to, you'd go upshift to 6th gear and stay flat, and you would turn in, and you just hope that you got the car down to the line and had the right car positioning so that you could come off the corner and know that you could drive it off before, while the power steering kind of locked up on you. And that was a pretty much a consistent, every lap type of thing. And of course, the hotter the ambient was, the hotter the power steering would get. And so, we would always be playing with settings in the car to try to help minimize load. But it was just those type of tracks just brought out some pretty odd characteristics in the car that, it was like, well, no, that's just kind of, we just have to figure it out and deal with it. But, yeah, I mean, the tracks were cool. There was some pretty, I think New Jersey was another one we raced at, which was just a gnarly circuit that it's just not one of the big ones, but we would go and it would be a great show, and it would always attract a lot of people. So it was neat. It was neat. There was always something new, it seemed, in the GrandAm days as far as tracks were concerned.
Well, that's awesome, Mark. It's great to talk about your GrandAm times. Obviously, if you want to plug what you're doing now, I know you guys just won your Pilot Challenge Championship in your Hyundai Veloster N TCR, which was amazing. Your first year at IMSA to come in and and win the title. And I think you guys were 1 and 2, right?
Yeah. So the Hyundai program has been awesome in IMSA, and Michael Lewis and I had a great season last year, as did Harry Gottsacker and Mason Philippi. They were awesome, and we had some great competition. The car was stellar, and I think we're going to see some more Hyundai Veloster N TCRs running as a result of our great 2019 season. So we're excited. It's going to be another great year, and we're expecting more cars and higher car count and a growing class. So we're looking forward to getting back on track in a few weeks.
I heard you're also going to try and go to the Nürburgring this year.
Yeah, it's an exciting year. We're so the four of us, our goal will be to run the Nürburgring 24-hour at the end of May. But there's quite a process involved to get us to that point as far as licensing is concerned. And so it's not one trip to Germany. It's actually several trips to Germany between March and May, and several races at lower levels to try to meet the requirements necessary to do the 24-hour. And I've run the Nürburgring a few times just in street cars, and it is going to be one heck of an experience. We're all super excited, and we hope that we're able to check off all the requirements so we can get that license and go out there and really check off a massive bucket list item.
Well, that's awesome, Mark, and thanks so much for doing this. It's great to chat with you. It's awesome just to talk about the GrandAm days. Something I've always enjoyed watching when I was a kid. So it's cool to talk to one of the drivers and get the inside look at everything. So I really appreciate it.
Oh no, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Mark.
All right, take care.